Thanks for joining us for the family orientation about academic advising. We are thrilled to be joined with by Robert and Eric from advising today. But before I turn it over to them, I want to do some quick introductions and some housekeeping ground rules for you. So my name is Catherine Canals. I am the Assistant Director of New Student and Family Programs, and I primarily work with our families. So you'll be seeing me a lot throughout your students' journey here at TU. And I'm joined by a student from our office, so I'll turn it over to Grace to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Grace. I'm the Student Director of Family Engagement, and I'm a rising senior and nursing major.
So Grace and I are representing New Student and Family Programs, and we are here to help you ask questions. So if you have any questions for our presenters today, feel free to enter them using the chat function. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom window, and there's a speech bubble where it says chat. If you type in a chat question, Grace and I will be looking at those and asking them to our presenters after they finish going over their content. So feel free to put questions in there. I will give the caveat that if you enter a question I know will be answered, I might hang on to it for a little bit and let our presenters get there. So please know that if your question isn't asked right away, it's not because we don't want to answer it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Robert and Eric.
Well, hi everybody. My name's Eric. I'm Eric Walkus. I'm with the Academic Advising Center, and I primarily coordinate transfer student advising. So I guess just so we kind of know who we're talking to, there is a reaction button down on the bottom of your screen. If you're here and you have a transfer student who is getting advising, could you just give me like a thumbs up like you see on my screen? I'm just kind of curious to see who we're talking to so we can get a good sense. Okay, so it looks like we might have a few. So I work with transfer students. I coordinate the advising for them. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but generally speaking, regardless of whether or not you're a transfer or a freshman, you're basically a Towson student at the end of the day. So what Robert and I want to do, and I'll let him speak in a second, but what we'd like to do is I want to talk a little bit about what the orientation and advising process looks for both freshmen and transfers. And then Robert and I would like to kind of talk about just the process of how advising works generally here, because at Towson, we have a pretty strong culture of academic advising. So it will definitely be something that is a mandatory component of your students' time here. So anyway, it's nice meeting everybody. And like Catherine said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
You want to start the PowerPoint, Eric?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so thanks very much, everybody. My name is Robert Carp. I'm also from Academic Advising. I work with Eric. My specialty areas are technology, and I also manage our student academic advisors. So what we're going to kind of go over with you today is just some general information about advising at Towson, both for the transfer program and for our first year students, and get to know you a little bit, take your questions at the end, and hopefully give you some really relevant and helpful information. So go ahead, Eric. Okay, so this is a picture of the Academic Advising Center at Towson University. Our department, we coordinate advising across campus. So we coordinate the advising for the first year program. As Eric said, we coordinate the transfer advising program. And each of our advisors have specialty areas. The liaison to the College of Health Professions, Eric is the liaison to the College of Science and Math. We have 12 professional advisors in our office, plus 3 admin support personnel and 8 student academic advisors. And so we do a lot of the work across campus, coordinating with other departments and making sure advising is on the same page, especially when it comes to our first year program. So we're going to talk a little bit about a first year program on the next slide. I'll do one more for me, Eric.
Sure.
All right. Oh, that's transfer. Okay, go ahead with transfer.
Yeah, so why don't we start with transfer students? So incoming transfer students, and much of this will still apply to freshmen. So because like I said, a lot of, when it comes generally to advising, at the end of the day, all Towson students, regardless of their major, are trying to fulfill the same types of requirements. But I want to make sure that I speak a little bit to transfer students. So we are currently in the process of our transfer orientation advising, and essentially what that is, obviously things have gotten a little different with COVID, but we've shifted our advising and registration virtually. So incoming transfer students, when they are admitted and they are admitted and committed to Towson, we make sure that we have all of the final transcripts that are submitted to Towson University, and it will go through our admissions department. Once we have those, the admissions department does an evaluation to determine equivalencies on Towson University credits. And generally, a good rule of thumb to think about is, remember that, one of the big worries that we hear a lot from students is, will all my credits transfer? And so Towson does a really good job at transferring credits. And in fact, we are one of the University System of Maryland schools. So we communicate very well, and we are very familiar with all of the other Maryland institution schools. So if you have a student either coming from another four-year school in Maryland or another community college in Maryland, 99%, I feel pretty confident about that. We've seen virtually almost all of those credits come in. We have equivalencies for them. So that process kind of functions like that, and we will review it. Now, if you have a student who has maybe a mix of four-year schools elsewhere or is coming from out of state, we do see quite a bit of credits come in. So there are ways to determine those credits, but generally your students are fine. By the time they are reaching advising, their credits are already in and they've been assessed with an advisor. So the way things work right now is we have an advising and registration day, and we are actually in the middle of our second week of transfer advising and registration. During that time, students will be meeting with an academic advisor from the major department. So that is somebody who is already intimately familiar with the program. It's not really a general advisor as much as it is somebody who is actually in their major. So they will be reviewing your students' credits. They will also be reviewing the transcript evaluation to determine what classes fit into the major's curriculum overall. And then the student will come and then they will work with that advisor to kind of build a schedule and enroll in those classes. And then so at the end of the second week of the first semester for your student, all incoming transfer students will see an academic advisor placed on their account. And so the academic advisor could very likely be one of their professors who is teaching them in their classes. But transfers will be given an academic advisor and they will see that. So once we get through the first 2 weeks of the semester, because of course there's a lot of transition in that week, there's a lot of students who are changing classes and making adjustments. So once we get a good sense of when things have stopped changing around so much, that is when the departments are going to be assigning an actual faculty advisor to the major. And I am going to talk more generally a little later about faculty advisors, but because that does apply to both freshmen and transfer students alike. So I'll talk a little bit more about that general advising process, but basically this is kind of the situation with transfer advising, and they will come in the summer, meet with somebody, and they will have their schedule, and they'll be able to kind of make adjustments as we keep getting new transfer students in. They will be able to make adjustments starting on August 1st once we've seen all of our transfer students. All right, so then I'm gonna give it over to Robert, and he's gonna talk a little bit about the first year experience.
Great, thanks, Eric. So the first year experience program we refer to as FYE is a comprehensive program that all first year students are enrolled in. The purpose of this program is to help students with the transition from becoming a high school student to a college student. The first semester of any student's academic career in higher education is undoubtedly their most difficult semester. So this program that we run, and we've actually been running this program for about 27 years now, is to help facilitate that process. It's an extremely hands-on program. The advisors that work with the first year students are specifically trained to become FYE advisors. So our office, our department hires faculty and staff advisors, and we don't just hire anybody. We put them through an interview process. We want to make sure they want to work with freshmen, and then they go through a comprehensive training program to help them understand how to advise a first-year student, how that's different from advising a student past the first year. So your student will be assigned a first-year experienced advisor, and that person they'll be working with for the entire year. And in all likelihood, it's going to be an advisor who is either a faculty member from their major or an expert in the major field. So for example, I advise pre-nursing students, and that's primarily because I've been doing it for a long time in terms of working with the College of Health Professions. Your first year experienced advisor is going to be one of your students' most reliable resources during their first year. They're somewhere between a family member, a friend, a mentor, a counselor, really their primary support. And they're really going to get to know their first year advisor, especially during the first semester at Towson. Now, you might notice if your student has showed you their schedule, they have a class on there called ORIE 305. ORIE 305 is not a 4-credit class. This is really how we coordinate advising at Towson. So all the students are put into an ORIE section that corresponds to their academic advisor. So for example, my ORIE section is section 5. So if you have any students in ORIE 305 section 5, I will be working with them for the whole year. But the ORIE class isn't for credit, but it's used to make sure that the students understand that there is a organizational mechanism to this FYE program. So part of the ORIE 305 class is an initial meeting with your academic advisor that'll happen during the Welcome to Towson weekend. So the Welcome to Towson is an event that happens right before school begins. And the Wednesday and Thursday, the students will move into the residence halls if they're living on campus. But that Friday is our academic orientation. And your students are going to spend 3 hours with their first year advisor, getting to know them, understanding the requirements of the FYE program, expectations, what the student can expect of the advisor in terms of appointments and email responses and communication. So they'll really get a good understanding and comprehensive information about their program, about the major, about the requirements, how to make changes to their schedule if they are going to be doing that at all. Aside from that August 27th meeting, there are at least 3 more mandatory meetings during the first semester that your student is going to meet with their academic advisor. So it's really a hands-on program, going to be guiding them through the first semester. And then the second semester, it turns into ORIE 306. And we back off a little, and there's 2 mandatory meetings, but we wanted to put it more in the hands of the students at that point. So they'll be working really closely with their academic advisor, understanding programs, and Eric's going to go over with you a little bit more in terms of how the student schedules were made, because that's one of the most important pieces that we want freshmen to understand. And during the online orientations that they hopefully have been attending, we cover some of this as well. So Eric, why don't you take it away from here?
Sure. So with this, I think for those folks who have kind of been through the process with their students, you might be familiar with what we call at Towson our academic interest form. And this is essentially kind of what gets the ball rolling. The academic interest form, it serves a lot of purposes. It comes to us to, number one, let us know that the student is actually interested and they're joining us at Towson. But it also lets us know what their major is, as well as some time constraints and other information that is helpful to the student. So we do oftentimes get asked, why can't I build my schedule? So we in the Academic Advising Center, we are very well versed in the academic policies and curriculum that can be incredibly complex. And so we want to make sure that at the end of the day, the goal here is that we want to make sure the students have a good foundation for their overall major progression. And oftentimes that can start almost immediately. And so we want to make sure that we are at least giving the students the classes that they actually need to continue with their progress. So when it comes to that, there's a few aspects of this. So the academic interest form, like I said, it is kind of the beginning piece of this bigger pie. And the academic interest form is the opportunity for the student to share their preferences with us. So even though we are building the student's schedule to make sure that it is correct from a pathways and progression standpoint, we still want the student to have some say in what their classes are. And so we have 14 cores, and we ask them what their preferences would be. We give them two choices, a first choice and a second choice for each of those cores. And when we can, we will be giving the students those preferences, but we have to consider other things as well. So in addition to that, we're going to take in consideration the placement tests. So for incoming students, we do want to see the placement tests. And when it comes to math placement, just remember, we have over 60 majors here at Towson, and every single one of those majors has a specific mathematics pathway that it follows. So there are some majors that have very little math. There are other majors that have a significant amount. So if we understand the student's proficiency in math, it gives us a much better idea of where to place the student on that very specific mathematics pathway. And that is something that we don't expect the incoming students to know the exact pathways, because like I said, it can be a spider web of different classes and prerequisites that can be a little complicated, but we know those things. And we're also going to take into consideration the graduation requirements for students. So, your students' priority right now is we want to make sure that they are doing well in their first semester's courses and acclimating to Towson. So graduation is not necessarily probably on their minds right now, but we know the pathways to get to graduation. And like I said, very often it will start immediately first semester. So we want to make sure that we're placing students in appropriate coursework for that. But of course, we're also going to consider course availability. So like I said, your student is letting us know their preferences on their academic interest form. And we will definitely try to give your students their preference. But of course, is if the class is available. And remember, this is just one of many semesters that your student's going to have here. So if they can't get a particular class that they were really looking forward to taking this semester, they will have plenty of opportunity to register once again, once the courses become available for the next semesters following. We're also going to look into any potential AP or IB scores. So if your student's taken an advanced placement test, these are questions that we've asked of them on the academic interest form, because essentially what we want is to make sure that we are not registering a student for a class they will already be earning by either getting an AP score through one of these IB tests, or if a student is bringing in college level credit. So, this obviously goes for transfer students as well. There are students, incoming freshman students, who have actually already taken some college level credit. And so we ask these questions, and we want to make sure that we are not going to double up on some additional coursework that they've already taken. We're also going to consider whether or not the student is a commuting student or a resident student. So obviously, if the student is living on campus, they have significantly more flexibility when it comes to course times than a commuting student. So with a commuting student, we are going to work to try to condense those classes as much as possible to make the travel both to and from campus much easier for that student. But out of all of these things, just remember that perhaps one of the most important considerations that we look into would be your major requirements. So the reason why this is important is because oftentimes there are major requirements that actually also satisfy core requirements. So in some cases, if your student asked for a preferred core, there might have been a better strategic option when selecting major requirements, because we can both satisfy not only a core requirement, but a major requirement with just a single course. And whenever that is applicable, we certainly are going to do that, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're giving the students the strategic options to kind of better prepare themselves for sophomore year, junior year, and so on. So this is basically how the schedule was made. And like I said, it is a lot that goes into this, but we still want your student to have some preference here. And so we do our best to kind of make that happen. But as you can see, it's a pretty complex process. And, there are a lot of considerations when it comes to this. So we also have, we will want to consider the 5 graduation requirements. And these are things that we are letting your students know about, regardless of whether they're transfer students or freshman students. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be something that they will all need to focus on. And especially for those students who are incoming transfer students, many of them are coming in and already beginning on their 300, 400 level, upper level coursework. And so graduation is a little bit more on the forefront of those students' minds. But at the end of the day, that is kind of the purpose of this FYE program for freshmen that Robert was discussing, because by the end of that freshman year, we are working with students to at least give them some semblance and understanding of what they should be looking at for as they progress into sophomore and junior and senior year. So these are the 5 graduation requirements. They need 120 credits to graduate. This includes 32 upper level units, which for the most part, that kind of just happens naturally as students are going through their major. They will need to complete a 2.0 GPA. Now this of course can be different depending on the major, but generally speaking, 2.0 GPA is the requirement. They obviously need to complete the entirety of the core curriculum as well as all the requirements for their major. So pretty simple stuff. And as the process moves on, your student will be working with an advisor to make sure that they are getting all of these check boxes off. So Robert, do you want to take over from here?
Yep. So one of the biggest questions we get asked all the time in academic advising is, how can I support my student without being overbearing? And the answer is, we absolutely want you to support your student, but we want you to do it in a way that empowers your student. We're big on empowering our students here at the university. And one of the things you can ask them is ask them about their academic advisor, especially our first year students. Do you know who your advisor is? Have you met them? Have you got to know them? Have you asked your questions? Same with transfer students. If they don't see an advisor in their student center by the first week of class, they need to contact the department of their major. But the biggest challenge for students is asking for help and going to get help. So what we have at Towson is an incredibly comprehensive support mechanism in place for our students. So whatever problem they may encounter at the university, be it academic, personal, or even professional, there are support systems in place to help them. And what you're looking at, just a couple of the resources that we have on campus. The Career Center obviously can help with students looking for internships and jobs on campus. They can help students who are still deciding on their major, identify resources to help them know what majors they could potentially have. If you're looking for a job, they have interview skills. The Tutoring and Learning Center is our primary tutoring center at Towson. Most 100, 200 level courses are taught there. Also, we have academic coaching. Writing Center is great for papers, and of course the library when it comes to helping students understand research and what journals and information they need in order to become successful with their research papers. Go ahead to the next slide, Eric. And these are some others. So Counseling Center, obviously, if they run into any personal problems. So one of the things early on we can tell as academic advisors if the student is struggling early on. And one of our first mandatory meetings, we see them couple weeks into the semester just to see how things are going. And one of the things that I ask my students, and you could ask this as well, is, are you sleeping and eating normally? One of the signs that something is happening is if, no, I'm not getting any sleep and I'm eating poorly. So that's when we offer the support of the Counseling Center. And there is not only one-on-one counseling with professional therapists, but we also have workshops and different ways that we can support the students in terms of stress. The public communication system helps students who are doing presentations and speeches. Center for Student Diversity and the Accessibility and Disability Support Services are also there for our students. So as you can see, there really is no problem that a student can encounter that we don't have a support system in place. The trouble students have is they either wait too long because they're nervous about asking for help and then they get stuck, or they don't approach somebody ahead of time like a professor if they're having trouble in a course. So we want to make sure they're getting these support systems in place early and often. And that's one of the best ways you can support your student in terms of their growth. So that's our presentation, and we really appreciate you all being here. And at this time, we would welcome questions. We open up the floor. If you want to have a question, Catherine, are they allowed to unmute and ask their questions? We're going to keep it in the chat.
Yeah, if we could keep it to the chat, that helps expedite getting everyone's questions answered. And we do have several for you already. So it looks like several of our families on the call today have students who are coming from high school, but have graduated with an associate's degree. And so it looks like a lot of people are looking for reassurance that what you mentioned about students coming in with credits applies to them as well.
Yeah, so that's good question. So yeah, it's a dual enrollment program, and we're seeing more and more of these. And so generally when a student is coming in with that associate's degree, the students are still going to be taking our Towson seminar course, which is a course that is kind of like an introduction to Towson, but it's kind of a way to kind of familiarize yourself with the research and everything like that. So all of our students who are incoming freshman level, regardless of whether or not they have an associate's degree, they're taking a Towson seminar. And then usually all of those students, any transfer student or any like dual enrollment student is generally not bringing in our core 9 and 14 requirements. So the student will be getting those classes as well. And then finally, if there's any particular like math the student would need for their major or any particular major requirement that we are going to get them in, that's generally what your student can expect. But to answer more directly to your student's question when it comes to their associate's degree coming in, if we've had any questions or if we needed to review like an unofficial transcript from them just to confirm things, we've reached out and asked them. But generally, most of our incoming dual enrollment freshmen are providing that information on their academic interest form.
And we do have articulation agreements with every in-state 2-year and 4-year school in Maryland. So if it's a community college from Maryland especially, we have to accept all their credits. So they're automatically articulated and we know what the courses are coming in as.
Sorry, I'm actually seeing a question in the chat that I can address really quick. So there's a question, are the schedules made already? And there's a student who did the academic interest form and the math placement, but hasn't mentioned seeing a schedule. And that's actually totally fine. Students aren't necessarily expected to have seen their schedule. I think most probably have, just because it's of course exciting and you want to see what classes you're getting. But the academic interest form, just remember, we are still seeing some trickle in. And so the due date of that form ideally was May 15th. But we are still seeing some come in. So obviously there are some schedules that we are still working on building. But I think for the most part, most of these students that we've seen, they do have a schedule coming in, yes.
We have some folks who are concerned about not being able to work with their students' specific academic advisor prior to school. So can you go through when a family can expect their student would be assigned the specific advisor, and what should they do up until now because the departments that they're trying to contact aren't getting back to them?
Right. So in terms of meeting with their advisor, we're still putting students into ORI sections. So that's not finalized yet. So we don't have the actual list of every student being assigned to every advisor. So that's still happening. The other thing is still happening is that we're still moving students around in sections. We're getting, we've just begun actually in July to get AP and IB scores. So we're making a lot of changes to schedules. So schedules aren't finalized yet. In terms of speaking and working with their advisor, the students, as I mentioned, will be meeting with their advisor on the 27th of August for 3 hours. So they're going to be spending a lot of time with them, going to be able to ask as many questions as they want to, get a lot of information about their major, their programs. If the students have a specific question about their schedule, they can email our department. We ask that you don't go to admissions or the registrar. We handle all the schedules. So they can email our department, and the email address is freshreg@towson.edu. And Catherine can put it in the chat for everybody, or thanks, Eric, put it in the chat. And please feel free to send questions that way. And we will work with the students. And we would like the question to come from the student and the student's email address. That's also really important. I'd like to reiterate that from here on out, students should be communicating with faculty, staff, and other students at Towson with their Towson University email address. We actually can't communicate because of safety and FERPA with personal email accounts. So please have the student use their personal email us at FredWest with their questions. We'll do the best we can in order to support the students and answer any questions we can.
And then just to piggyback off Robert, also transfer students will be having an advisor assigned to them as well. And like I said, they should expect to see their students, their advisor on their account within 2 weeks of the semester. And like I said, one of a big reason for that is because there's a lot of shifting that goes on in that first week. You've probably heard the term add drop period, or we call it change of schedule period. And so these things happen and it's a lot of moving parts. But once we kind of freeze our data, so to speak, that's when advisors and departments will know exactly what students they should expect in their majors. So then they will have a major specific advisor assigned to them.
If a student feels like they're being asked to retake a class that they should already have a credit for via transfer credits, how can they navigate asking for their evaluation to be reconsidered?
Sure. So, oh, go ahead, Robert.
Well, there's two different ways we're looking at this. One is for freshmen and one is the transfers. I'll let Eric handle the transfer question. For our first year students, if they see a class on their schedule that they know they're receiving credit for example, let's say they see Psych 101 on their schedule, but they know they're receiving Psych 101 credit through Advanced Placement AP, then we absolutely need them to email freshreg@towson.edu, because we will make a change to their schedule, because we definitely do not want them repeating coursework they've already done. We've asked for that information on the academic interest form. The students should have let us know if they're even anticipating AP credit, even if they're not sure about the test results yet. We take that into account when they make their schedules. So yeah, any updates to AP, any problems with classes that you're already taken that you're transferring in, we absolutely would like to know about, because we will make a change to their schedule. In addition, if a student is changing their major, we also need to know about that, because we will make a change to their schedule in that case. We call these types of things academically essential changes. And what that means is if we don't make a change to the student's schedule, it could adversely affect their academic career. So we will make changes in that case. We can't make changes right now if a student doesn't like the time, professor, or the class they're in. As Eric mentioned, they will have an opportunity to make changes to their schedule during that Welcome to Towson weekend. And Eric can cover the transfer portion of this.
Yeah, and this also can apply to freshmen as well. So also, if you feel pretty strongly that there is an equivalency, or there should be an equivalency for one of these classes, there are resources that you can use that are actually just completely available to students and actually intended for students. So if you are coming from another university system of Maryland school, there is and I'll put it in the chat, you can go to artsys.usmd.edu, and basically the entire university system of Maryland collects all of the equivalencies, because remember, we are a big school network. And so generally speaking, the equivalencies are very accurate. And because, like I said, we have spent a lot of time collecting. But if you also look, we also have another option. It is called TEST. That's the Transfer Credit Evaluation System. And we also use TEST, which is another way you can confirm an equivalency. And so our admissions office will be reviewing these credits and giving assessments, and you'll be able to see exactly the equivalency from these websites. So I would encourage you to take a look if you're not totally convinced of the equivalency. But yeah, so if there are any issues with transfer equivalencies, you can certainly contact the transfer admissions office and they will review that evaluation. So that is through the Transfer Student Center.
Thank you. We have a question that says, how can you tell from the schedule if all or some of the courses are credit-bearing courses? For example, non-credit remedial math course, etc.
So there's a couple things you can do. In terms of the courses that aren't going to be bearing any credit toward graduation, that's really limited to Math 95. And I already mentioned the ORI course that isn't a 4-credit course. Otherwise, the courses you're taking are gonna go toward graduation. They're gonna go toward credits to the university. So that's really the only course that you're receiving 3 credits in terms of making you a full-time student, but it doesn't go toward graduation. But the others all do bear credits to graduation.
Sorry, there's a lot of great stuff here, scrolling through these. if a student knows that they might have to transfer out of TU, how can they best prepare themselves to take the right classes at TU, and who should they contact to work through that?
Sure. So remember, it's always the best idea to make sure you are reaching out to that school that you intend to transfer to. Because even though, especially like with the University System of Maryland, even though we have really good partnerships and articulation agreements that exist, not every program is the same. And in fact, the University System of Maryland doesn't compete when it comes to major options. So it is very possible that when you are transferring out of Towson, you might be going into a school that has a much different curriculum, maybe a slightly similar curriculum, but your credits from Towson, and if you've come from a previous institution, you will want to get started on that process early, so your credits can be assessed by that department. And usually, their institutions work similarly to our institution. We have the starting point is going through admissions and working with a transfer evaluator to make sure your credits look good and how they would fit in with your overall curriculum.
Thank you. Someone asked, can a transfer student be a part of the FYE program?
That is a good question. We don't have an FYE program for incoming transfers, but remember, probably the most important component of the FYE program is the fact that we are making sure that every student has an advisor that they can rely on. But that's really no different than the way we treat transfers. So when a transfer comes in a way, because they've already gone through some type of first year experience. They've already kind of been through college. So that's why they are actually going to be paired immediately with a faculty advisor who's in their department. And, in a way that is much different than the type of advising that FYE students would get. But the support is still there. There are still advisors. There's a single one-on-one advisor that your transfer student is going to be working with. And it's the same with FYE, except with FYE, our focus there with the freshmen is a little bit more on, general core curriculum. Is it being satisfied? What are some of the foundational prereqs for majors? By the time a transfer student has already come in, they are beyond that. So, but they still get advising. They're still going to have mandatory advising and still going to have an advisor in their department to work with.
I also want to give a quick plug for the Transfer Mentor Program in the New Student and Family Programs office. If it's the social connection and acclimation that your student is looking for, that could be a service that is helpful to supplement. I have a question about undecided majors. Will they not be able to take their required math class until they declare their major?
Great question. So the answer is yes. If you're an incoming first-year student and you are still deciding on a major, we will not put you in a math class yet. And the reason for that is, as Eric mentioned, with math at the university, there's two distinct pathways that students will take depending on their major. One pathway is what we call non-algebra intensive. And these pathways, the terminal math, we call it, or the last math that they have to take, is either a low-level math if you're, for example, in maybe a liberal arts major, so you're just taking one math, or you could be taking statistics as your last math class. The other pathway is the algebra intensive pathway, and that's for majors in the health professions, computer science, biology, the sciences, and we know that their program requires algebra. So you're going to be doing one of those, and what we don't want to happen with students who are still deciding on their major, if we take them down the wrong path initially, they could be wasting their time. So we want to make sure that they have a better idea, and maybe even if they narrow it down for us, we could start them on the math pathway. They don't have to know exactly. And the other thing with deciding students at the university, we don't require students to declare until 60. We highly recommend they declare by 45. So we really, really want them to, make a decision by the second semester of their sophomore year, ideally, so we can help them plan for the rest of their academic career, but we don't make it mandatory that first-year students or deciding students really have to have a major when they come into the university. But that's the reason why we don't give math to first semester deciding students at this point.
How or where should a student check for their schedule if they haven't seen it yet?
Sure. So you can go on your online student account. And so if you were, so the online student account, we use, at Towson, we use something called PeopleSoft. It's where the student can find their student account. And it is essentially the student's online life at Towson, and essentially has everything from finances to an academic requirements report to your schedule. And so if you go on the main web page, you can go, there is an actual section for students at the top. They can just click that drop-down menu and then go to My TU. And then from there, they will be able to access our online software called PeopleSoft, where they'll immediately be presented with their online student account. And so all the information is there. Like I said, they'll be able to see their finances immediately, and they will be able to see their schedules as well.
How does honor student advising work? Do they get 2 advisors for their major and for honors?
Right, so they will get a specific advisor who works with honors college students, depending who that advisor is. So for example, I advise honors pre-nursing students as well. There are certain people who advise honors students in the College of Fine Arts and Communication. So each college has different advisors. Some are specific honors advisors. But aside from that, the honors college is very active in communicating and working with these students. So they will receive information about workshops, about groups, about meetups from the honors college, as well as support to make sure the requirements are being met. We meet with the honors college every semester to see if there are any updates and to make sure their needs are being met in terms of honors college requirements. So they will have an FYE advisor who works with honors and non-honors students. We do have a couple advisors that exclusively work with honors students, but for the most part, it's a shared responsibility. But they will receive lots of support from the honors college as well.
Are AP classes that counted at community college and should be on transcripts be counted when they transfer?
That is a great question. You will need to make sure that you are contacting College Board to have those AP scores sent. So even if we are receiving a transcript and it does reflect an AP score, every college kind of assesses AP scores maybe a little differently. So it is important that you are just sending that AP score from College Board directly to our admissions office so it can be reviewed. Because like I said, it might be a little different than at another institution. So we will need it as any institution or any test like an AP score should be sent separately.
But once the AP gets used, then it can't be used again. So for example, if I took AP Psychology at Community College of Baltimore County, or got credit, I'm sorry, for Psych 101 from AP at CCBC, and on their transcript at CCBC, you see Psych 101. That Psych 101 is going to transfer to Towson, not the AP. Okay, so what Eric is saying that, let's say, you know, at CCBC, a 3 didn't get you credit for Psych 101, but at Towson it might. In that case, you could send the AP score over and we may be able to give you credit. But for the most part, once a university accepts AP, it's transitioned to a course. We take that course as a transfer credit, not the AP score.
Great. We have a few folks who asked, will my student's academic advisor be the same for all 4 years?
So the way we do it, so the goal of FYE is that we are basically trying to teach them how to kind of take some responsibility of their curriculum on their own, so they at least are aware of what they're getting themselves into. So ideally, at the very least, by, like Robert said, around 45 credits, we really do like to see students transition. But after you could say for the end of freshman year, which generally is about 30 credits, the student is then transitioned over to a major advisor, because remember that major advisor knows and is intimately familiar with the more upper level curriculum of the degree, and will be able to help them kind of get through some of those upper level prerequisites as they progress in their higher level coursework. So they will be transitioned over to a major. Now, it is possible when they have their major advisor that advisor will be with them throughout the rest of their time here. So, but you know, on an informal basis, I still have some of my FYE students from 4 years ago who I still like seeing, and we still chat. So, informally, we are still meeting with students all the time, and I formed some really great relationships with some students, and I know Robert's the same. So, we are still there as a support network if the student is interested in continuing a relationship.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I see in my chat. So I want to ask Eric and Robert if anyone sent things to you. I'll put out a last call for questions. And in the meantime, I like to throw it over to Grace to give a little bit of the student perspective. So Grace, what are your expert tips on scheduling and keeping a good academic plan?
I guess one of my biggest recommendations would definitely be meeting with your advisor early on, especially freshman year. Like making yourself known with them, having a good relationship with them. You don't want to just like meet with them once and never again. You want to make sure they know who you are and definitely like use them. For most people, I would say coming to college is probably your first time making your own schedule. And even if you're a transfer student and you went to a different school, and the process might be a little bit different at Towson. And it can be very stressful making a schedule. So definitely use your advisor. That's exactly what they're there for. So yeah, I would definitely just say reach out to your advisor as much as possible. Meet with them as much as possible, even if it's for 5 minutes, to just be like, hey, like, just want to make sure you think like I'm on the right track, everything's going good. Because ultimately this is their expert field.
Excellent. Thank you, Grace. I hope that our academic advising friends would probably ditto that sentiment. And we did have a question come in. What is an AP score?
Good question. It's a score that you earn on a test that is called an advanced placement test. So it is essentially students in high school have the opportunity to take an advanced placement class, and they then they're offered the opportunity to take a test to see if they are proficient enough to earn the college credit before actually entering college. So that's basically it. So it's essentially a score of a test that you can get a college credit for in a particular field.
Excellent. Well, those are all the questions that I'm seeing right now. I want to remind folks that if your student has questions about their schedule, about their degree plan, that Fresh Reg is the way to go for our freshman students, and make sure that transfer students are checking that ARTSYS system. They are great, great resources. Oh, I did get one more question.
Sure.
If my incoming student received their schedule and is all good, is it safe to assume that it's final and she's all set?
It's not safe to say final just because, as I mentioned, we're still making changes, but for the most part, yes. If your schedule is all set, you're not expecting any surprises from AP, IB, or college coursework that we don't know about, then you could assume the schedule is set for the most part.
Mm-hmm. And just to piggyback on that, just know every class that has been selected for your student has some type of particular, very specific purpose to it. So remember, we are trying to fulfill requirements, but at the same time, we want the classes to be enjoyable. So when we can, we do try to give your students their preferences. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are checking off requirement boxes to make sure they are progressing forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so don't hesitate to encourage your student to reach out, like Robert mentioned, using their towson.edu email address if they have questions and need things, and we are here to support them, certainly. From the family perspective, we do have more family orientation sessions coming up this week. We're joined tomorrow by the Health Center and the Counseling Center, so feel free to join us same time, 5 p.m. With links at towson.edu/families. And that's also where you can find the recording of this presentation if you want to rewatch. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Robert and Eric. We look forward to seeing you all again, and go Tigers.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.